Hello and welcome to a special end of the year edition of Chip Chat. And with me today I have Sully from GameCast.
Hello, Joe. Thank you for having me.
No worries. Hello. We were going to have Count and Grant as well, but unfortunately Count can't be here. I think he's got work commitments, and Grant is also actually got work commitments. So unfortunately it's just us two.
It is the season, Joe.
It is that time, yeah. So hopefully they'll be on the next one. But we're going to move forward this time, and we're going to discuss the best and worst of the year, and that's going to be broken up into the cock-up of the year, the worst company of the year, which is, as I called it last year, Scuzzbag of the year, the worst game of the year, and then we're going to move on to some positives. The best game of the year, which we kind of touched on a bit in your video, didn't we? The games of the decade. So
yes,
we'll talk about that a little bit.
Yes, check that one out if you haven't already.
Yeah, go and check it out. And then we're going to look at the best company this year, and also then we're going to move into some general positives before we move on to hopes and fears for next year. So starting off, we've got cock up of the year, and what would be your cock up of the year, Sully?
Well, to be honest, I just want to start by saying that I found it quite humorous when we're talking about our hopes and fears, but also keeping it generally positive for next year. We'll see how that one goes.
We'll try.
Yeah, we'll try. Hopefully it doesn't just
don't mention
down
EA.
spiral. Yeah. Or there's a lot of people you can mention these days, like Blizzard, Bethesda. But onto my cock-up of the year, actually, which ties in Blizzard. I think I have to give my cock-up of the year to Blizzard and their whole BlizzChung China disaster. You're familiar with this, aren't you, Joe?
Oh, yeah, I did a video about this.
Oh. Yeah, just kind of repeatedly foot-in-mouth type scenario. And then a little bit of backpedaling and a lot of kind of... I feel like them putting out false truths, like saying one thing, but actually... you could kind of just see straight through it. And we all know why Blizzard had the stance that they had, because they want to retain China and the audiences over there and blah, blah, blah. But just the way they handled it, like, I mean, I can see why they took the action they took. Don't agree with it, but they're trying to protect their financial interests. But it could have been handled PR-wise.
It struck me, I mean, the way I looked at it, it was a bit like a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I mean, they could have given him a slap on the wrist, to say, look, we don't want people making political statements, and left it at that.
Yeah.
And that made me think that maybe they'd been under pressure to do something a bit more extreme. Whether that is the case or not, I don't know, but it was a awfully handled situation, and I honestly don't think they could have handled it much worse, to be honest.
No.
Short of taking the guy out and shooting him, it couldn't have been done.
Yeah, like hitting him, like putting a hit on him, like literally taking him out. Like that's the only way it could have been worse.
I mean, and then like you say, to backtrack, and they restored his prize money, which I don't know that they were in any position to take away from him in the first place. Mm-hmm. And they reduced his ban to 6 months from a year. But they also banned the guys who were the presenters, who, they had a much smaller part to play in it. And I don't know what's happened with them at all. I don't know where we are with those, whether they're doing any presenting now or not. But that was their job. It's their career as well. I mean, these guys, it's not like you or me. If someone kicks us off YouTube or whatever, it's a pain in the arse, but it's not really going to have a massive effect on us.
Oh, no.
But these guys, you're talking about their livelihoods here. And it's not like they're standing up and supporting some dubious regime. Quite the opposite. They're supporting, sort of democratic rights and stuff like this. And I don't know. I think it's a very dodgy area. Like I say, I think they should have kept it on the down low, not made too much of a deal out of it. Maybe giving him a slap on the wrist because, if you're going to be literal, he did break their terms of service, if you want to call it that. But yeah, it was so heavy-handed. And, then you got Bobby Kotick coming out this week and doing an interview and saying they don't want to get involved in politics. Well, you're a big multinational company. You're gonna cross over into politics on some occasions, and it's how you navigate that. And as we've both said, they navigated it terribly. So
it's one of those scenarios where it became incredibly transparent where the line was and how much they feared it impacting their bottom line. Clearly it was money motivated, or fear of loss of money motivated. And it really is scary. It is scary when China as a market can have that kind of influence.
Oh yeah, I mean, the idea that one market can actually change the way a company views freedom of speech is actually quite chilling.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
I mean, that's probably a little bit down the rabbit hole for us now, but that's probably like a whole other video. But yeah, sorry, Joe, go on. It's chilling. Absolutely.
No, I've really got not a lot else to add to that. I think we could be here for a couple of hours just discussing this, and I just hope we don't see any more of this. I think it nods in a direction that I don't want to see companies going. And I know a few people have said that they don't want to see American companies pandering to Chinese money, in effect, because that's what it is, money and political pressure. They need to grow some, to be honest, and not pander to what in effect is a totalitarian regime. Let's not beat around the bush.
Yeah, and I mean, I think and again, I'm not a Trump supporter whatsoever, but I think the only silver lining he has is he's not willing to pander towards those markets. All the taxes he has put on goods coming back in probably has done them some good in the short term with their economy and I guess local manufacturing and all this kind of stuff. But he's definitely not pandering to that market, which again is the only silver lining I'd give him. But I kind of would be worried where we might be now if he hadn't come into office and maybe kind of tried to hardline the Chinese market so much. Which is I think the only probably positive you can give him. You
have to stretch some to actually find something positive to say about that guy.
But it's very scary stuff. So Blizzard.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. That was
caught with the pants down.
Yeah, and as I say, Bobby Kotick, we don't want to be political. It's ridiculous. My one, though, would be, I mean, this probably falls slightly behind yours, to be honest, because I think that almost certainly is the cock-up of the year. But Stadia. I think Stadia is a very close second.
That's like the fun cock-up, isn't it, though?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's not actually doing anyone any real harm.
Except Google. Fuck them. Sorry, what?
Yeah, except Google. And I made a video about this with Grant, and we talked through this, and it's just, I mean, you can keep going for hours about the cock-ups they made. It's that they made cock-ups with the release. They made cock-ups with what they told people. I mean, when you compare it, and I said this in my video, when you compare it to Microsoft and you look at Microsoft and xCloud and the way they've handled that, xCloud is in effect a beta. It's a trial, and it's got more games. It runs better.
It's a better service price-wise.
Oh, man. I mean, at the moment it's free. And when it comes out properly, it's going to be integrated into Game Pass. So when you compare that to Stadia, and then you look at the pricing model on Stadia, when people received their bundle of the Founders Edition, and they tried to get up and play it, they hadn't got their codes to access the service or their games. I mean, it was...
Apparently, the hardware as well. The dongles.
The hardware was a joke because you had the Chromecast Ultra. The Chromecast Ultra that came with it worked with Stadia. The Chromecast Ultra that didn't come with it, that people already had, didn't work with Stadia. And people, I don't know if they've released it yet, but people were waiting for a firmware update in order for it to work with Stadia. Then there was all the stuff about it overheating. I mean,
probably shouldn't have called it a Chromecast. You know what I mean? Probably should have gone with different branding on their dongle. That is they called it the Stadia dongle. Like
yeah,
just
maybe.
So people knew the difference between the two and knew what would and what wouldn't work, because it was self-explanatory.
The irony is, though, it's exactly the same hardware. It just required a firmware update, which was on the one that people were purchasing, but not on the, not available to people to download, which is it strikes me as crazy.
You know what? I don't. I mean, like we know about the shortcomings. Like it's the whole thing's a flop. It's almost from what I've kind of the little bits and pieces I've read on it. It's kind of almost dead on arrival, right? Like it's kind of like nobody really wants to touch it. We all know it doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
But what I kind of find mind-boggling about the whole situation was who was Google like rushing to beat? You know what I mean? Like, sure, Project xCloud's there, but streaming has been this thing that's been slowly growing for the last, I want to say probably since PS Now probably launched. Like that was probably the kind of the beginning point when PlayStation bought the X On Live service and they kind of dabbled in themselves. They launched their own service. And, it's probably slowly been developing over the last few years since then. But what was the rush, like right now, this calendar year, to bang it out? To kind of go from announcing to launching within the space of 12 months?
I'm honestly scratching my head on that. The only thing I can maybe think of is maybe they were trying to beat xCloud to the punch. Maybe they were trying to beat Amazon, because there are rumors that Amazon's got something like this in the works as well. And, both Microsoft and Amazon have got more server infrastructure than Google at this stage. So they're the ones to beat. I mean, we've got NVIDIA, but NVIDIA have been out there for some time and they haven't really made inroads into the market in any great way. So I don't know. I think they would have been better off holding it off for a year and releasing it this time next year.
Are there examples?
But maybe they were worried about the console releases next year. I don't know.
That's a fair point. That's a valid point. Like 100%. Maybe they did want to just beat it out by the previous Christmas calendar year. Like that I would understand. And to be honest, if Microsoft is really going to go hammer and tong and fully launch the xCloud service, not necessarily fully launch, but maybe remove the kind of beta wheels on it, probably when the next consoles drop, right? Which Christmas holiday season next year. So maybe they were trying to beat that out by a full year. But has there ever been an example where, like strictly in the service industry, that kind of being first out equates to you winning? Like if surely the better service would win, the better value, the better service that actually works.
Yeah. And I mean, let's be honest, they could turn it round. But I think they've got an uphill battle. I mean, there's so many things stacked against them. They haven't really got the games that will attract people to the service.
Yeah.
They've got all the problems with latency that are inherent. You're not going to get rid of them overnight. They are inherent in a streaming service. And that's true of xCloud. It's true of PlayStation Now. It's true of Asus's, not Asus, what am I saying? It's, NVIDIA, their service. All these different services, they're all going to have certain elements of, the problems that arise as a result of streaming, just the way it is.
Yep.
You can mitigate that somewhat, and I know that Google, Microsoft, presumably Amazon, when they launch, they've got ways of mitigating this somewhat. But you've still got the problem of ISPs, and I mentioned this in my video with Grant, that Phil Spencer said, the ISPs have been really cooperative and helpful with us setting this up. But they still want to worry about their bottom line, and there's still data caps. And I remember when I went out with xCloud, and I was using xCloud to try it out on my phone, and actually out and about using data on my phone service, and it ramped up my data usage rapidly and quickly, and I was going to run out of data just through using xCloud. And these are the realities of it. Yep. So this is going to apply to everybody. But the difference is, if you look at Google, all their eggs are in one basket. It's all about streaming. If you look at xCloud's going to be incorporated into Game Pass. Bish, bash, bosh, sorted. You're at home.
It's there if you want
your
it.
Game Pass. You can use it there. You go out and about. You feel like having a blast of Halo or whatever it might be that you want to play. Forza, Gears, whatever, Will-o'-the-Wisps. And you can use it on your phone with a controller. So you've got the best of both worlds, and it's not going to be the ideal service. It's not going to be as good as using it on a dedicated console, but it's there as a secondary usage. Google hasn't got that. Google, I mean, I don't know. I just don't think Google knows the gaming market and knows their audience, and that's the other thing. That is the really big problem. Who's their audience for this? Because hardcore gamers aren't going to be interested in it because they've already got other systems that work better. And why would the casual gamer want to use it? I don't get it. I don't see why a casual gamer would use this when they go to use it and it's all laggy and I'm flummoxed.
Yeah, I honestly think it's an example of them. Yeah, I think you're on the money. Like, they don't know what is appealing to the gamer. They're kind of going with a relatively archaic structure of like pay a subscription fee and then you get the magazines, right? Like you pay for it all, like you pay for the magazines or something. Like it's just like who in the era of Netflix would want to pay for a subscription service and not have access to all the content for the price of your subscription service?
Quite.
Nobody.
It just makes no sense.
Nobody would. Absolutely nobody. And that, there alone is enough to sink Google Stadia.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
If you have to buy the games, and download them, and let's be honest, digital games are always more expensive than physical copies. If you have to buy the games, why would I not just go out and just buy the digital code or the actual physical copy? Like from the platform that I'm already on and play the game on local hardware. Like they're banking on being able to draw in the percentage of people that aren't gamers, that are, I think, interested in gaming and haven't got access to a gaming device. But how many of those people, if that's the audience they're kind of going for, like the broader audience, do you really think they're going to pay a subscription and then download the games at full price? No, the gamers are probably more likely to do that, but they already have the dedicated hardware. So why would they then want to do, the same thing? They wouldn't. It doesn't make sense.
No.
None of it makes sense. It's not thought out. Like the only reason I can see the reason why they went this route was to actually get publishers on board, because it's a very safe way of giving the publishers their cut, because they're still selling the game in a traditional sense. They're asking for a full retail price. So I think.
So you're not telling me that greed has actually scuppered them.
Well, I think greed is absolutely still present, absolutely, on Google's side. But I think this method ensures that they probably will be able to expand their library faster than probably what Phil Spencer can for Game Pass, because the Google price model, there's a huge safety net there because they're asking the full price for the game. It's not just the subscription service that publishers are taking their cut out of. So I think it's safe in that sense. It'd be like selling your game on Steam or another digital storefront. It's no different.
Yeah.
But I guess before we move on, John, we wrap it up for cock-ups. If you were Google, how do you fix this?
Oh, well, I think the first thing, and I said this again, I keep saying this, but I said this in my video with Grant, that the first thing they need to do, they can't do anything much about latency. They can't do much about the inherent problems that are with streaming. One thing they can fix, and they could fix this rapidly, the pricing model. They need to sort that out.
Uh-huh.
And they need to do it quickly, because if you look at the pricing model, even when it releases and becomes part of Game Pass, you look at the pricing model for Game Pass incorporating xCloud, it's much, much cheaper. It's almost a no-brainer. You can pay that and almost forget about it. Same actually with PlayStation Now. If you look at PlayStation Now, it's recently had a pretty hefty price cut. That is much more attractive than Stadia as well. So They need to sort out the pricing model, because at the moment they are pricing themselves out of the market, and they need to sort that out fast.
Absolutely.
Second, they need to get more games, and they need. I don't know how they can solve this one. They need, first party exclusives. We've said this about Microsoft for a long time. One of the big problems with Microsoft is they had this excellent piece of hardware in the Xbox One X, but there was nothing that would sell it to you in terms of software. There was no God of War, there was no Spider-Man, there was nothing that really said to you, buy this hardware. So they had the best hardware by far, and some of the best services by far, but they just didn't have that thing that entices people in when they have a look online or they go past the shop and says, buy me. And that's the same with Stadia, and in buckets as well, because at least Microsoft still do have some first-party properties. Stadia's got nothing like that. Nothing.
Absolutely. I mean, let's be honest. Stadia can only ever be at its absolute best, the best place for third parties. It's never going to have first parties.
No.
It can only It can only ever be what Xbox was this generation, which that there is enough to show that that's not enough, because the Switch has outsold the Xbox One, apparently, so they say.
Yeah,
right?
so I've heard, yeah.
So that's not enough in itself. But I mean, to be honest, if I was Google, I think the first thing you need to do is swallow your pride, put the beta wheels back on, call it a beta, and because it's a beta, remove the subscription fee and just charge people the full retail price of games. That's it. So you need to remove one of those price barriers instantly. And then I would absolutely be like doubling down on getting content onto that service.
That might help them next year, actually, when they release it without the the entry cost.
Yeah,
because there is going to be this option to have it without paying up front.
Well, I think that's what they can do right now, like easily enough right now. It's a service that doesn't work as well. Let's not forget that. So like, I think you shouldn't be charging people for the service. If they want to buy games through the service, I think that's different. That's their risk if they want to do it. They should know the risks going into this service. Like, surely nobody's going into Google Stadia without knowing what the service is like, right? You would hope so. But I think like them knowing that if they want to invest in a game, power to them. But they shouldn't have to pay for a service in a subscription fee. They shouldn't have to pay for it if it doesn't work. So I think that's good faith. I think they need to give potential consumers is, let them in for free, and then if they want to invest, sure, why not? I mean, ideally, I think it should be the other way around, because I think, if they have to have one paywall, like obviously they're probably going to get more people in if the games are free. But I can't see that working for Google, because I honestly think they want to stick to this kind of pricing model, because I think it's their only way of actually getting more games onto the service in the long run. So I think if it was me, stick with the full retail price games, drop the subscription service, and then just really, really double down on getting content onto the service and put the fucking beta, Google Stadia beta, throw it out there. We're back in beta, bitches. We've got warts. Come try us out. Swallow your pride.
Yeah, they definitely need to do something, because at the moment people are paying for a beta service, and that's not a good look.
That's not good. It really
isn't.
No. Sorry, Joe.
Right. Well, I think we've pretty much torn Stadia a new one.
Again.
So let's stick with being negative for the time being and look at Scuzzbag of the Year, as I called it last year, or Worst Company. And there's a fairly long list of companies that can fit in this. We've already covered Blizzard to some degree, but obviously there's EA, and I would bring up EA with their attempts to pull the wool over UK Parliament with their surprise mechanics. Surprise!
That's a good one.
I
forgot about that.
I watched the actual footage of this, and my jaw just dropped open. I could not believe they had the balls to actually come out with this one. And it just made me laugh. I was like, do people actually buy this? And to be fair, the guy who was interviewing them or, grilling them, he wasn't buying it at all. And it was great to watch them squirm, to be honest. But it's just one in a long line of things that EA have done in terms of their, trying to obfuscate and just pull the wool over everyone's eyes and make people think that these loot boxes and monetization techniques that they're using to manipulate people into buying money, into buying, things in the game are okay, that somehow it's all right because they're not loot boxes, they're surprise mechanics because, we're just letting you have a choice. And I find and Activision, we mentioned Blizzard, but Blizzard, Activision are just as bad. If you mentioned, sorry, I'm getting on a bit of a rant here, but you mentioned last year, I was listening through to our last year's one, and you were talking about how you were looking forward to Crash Team Racing, was it?
Yes, I believe so.
And Crash Team Racing came out and it had no microtransactions, and they said it wasn't going to have microtransactions as well. So a lot of people bought it on the strength of, okay, it's just going to be a re-release and it's all going to be great. And from all accounts, it was a pretty decent game. And then after the fact, I'm not sure how long it was, a month, 2 months, 3 months down the line, they shoehorned in microtransactions. So it's not just EA. But I think that there's a whole lot of these companies. We've got, 2K as well, with the way they try and shoehorn microtransactions into absolutely everything. And I think it is a scuzzy thing to do. And when you look at EA releasing Star Wars The Fallen Order, and it comes out and it's a proper game and people actually go out and buy it and they want to buy it and they want to play it, tells you everything you need to know that really an awful lot of gamers don't want this crap, and they keep telling us we want it because at the end of the day, and we've mentioned the bottom line before, this is all about the bottom line. So I put EA and Activision on the pedestal next to each other on this one. I think that they've been bloody awful again this year. And so that's for me. I don't know if you've got anyone to add to that.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's hard to get past EA and Activision. It's kind of, I guess, just business as usual for those two. Honestly, though, I think you really could almost toss up. Again, I know Blizzard is under Activision, but specifically Blizzard have had a horrible year for reasons we've already covered, and just their PR's kind of fallen apart a little bit in areas as well. Bethesda at the start of the year as well, copping a lot of warranted flack.
Oh God, Fallout 76 is the game that just keeps on giving, isn't it? I mean, they keep adding in microtransactions and don't improve it. And sorry, a lot of go on. A lot of again doubling back on what they've said. Like I believe one of them was like something to do with like microtransactions and the storefront, and then once upon a time saying there wouldn't be microtransactions for this particular aspect of the game, but now there is, blah blah blah. It's kind of, again, it's the game that keeps giving. We're in I think it's second year of giving now. It's going strong, or taking, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I don't think I could really give it to Blizzard. Bethesda this year. I think they were probably more up for it last year. I'd be very surprised if one of us didn't give it to Bethesda last year. Other than EA and Activision. But yeah, take your pick. Google, Bethesda, Blizzard, EA, Activision. Take your pick. They're all probably
even Epic. I mean, more Epic, last year, but even Epic.
Yeah, they've been kind of quiet this year though. Not great, but still quiet compared to last year. So yeah, I'm with you. It's kind of. Not necessarily anyone specifically stands out, like in your face. I think other than Blizzard, if you maybe pick one, I'd probably have to say Blizzard, which I guess is Activision anyway, isn't it? Yeah. I just think the whole of the AAA industry seems to have, certainly in terms of having any moral compass, they seem to have lost their way entirely. And it seems to be that they are entirely dictated by the bottom line. Oh, yeah. And I just don't think that it's something that can carry on. And
unless gamers are that daft that they are quite happy to go along with this, and I know some of them are, but as I said, mentioning, excuse me, mentioning Star Wars, the Fallen Order, there is an appetite for people to want to play real games. And when they keep trying to shoehorn what is in effect mobile games onto us and passing them off as AAA games, they look nice, they got good audio and all the rest of it, but in terms of actually gameplay and everything, the gameplay loop is designed in such a way to just screw money out of you. I think an awful lot of us are just sick of it. And I probably said this last year, but each year that goes on, it doesn't seem to get any better. It gets worse. And you do get the occasional glimmer of hope with games like, Star Wars Fallen Order. But I do think that's a blip. I do think that the AAA industry really has lost its way. They don't think that because they're making more money than ever, and they will continue to make more money than ever, all the while people keep buying these things. But when you look at the numbers of games sold for things like FIFA, I think last year, don't know about this year with 2020, but last year, 2019, sold less than 2018. They still made more money. But that actually means that the actual numbers of people playing these games are dropping. Yeah, and that surely over time that can't be sustainable.
Yeah.
Well, but
I don't know. It's kind of, you can't really see where the end line is, if you are purely motivated by your bottom line. And I mean, let's be honest, you're either motivated by your bottom line and that's your priority, or it's not. So it's one or the other. So, there's obviously a good portion of the industry that is motivated by the bottom line as their primary, target. And I understand, you're there, you have to be profitable. I get that. But, there's kind of that, when I say motivated by your bottom line, it's like that greed, that real greed element, isn't it? Where greed comes first. And it really is hard to see where that does eventually end with the industry, where it is now. Like, where does that go and where does it end? Because I honestly have no idea. And I'm not really sure why or how we got here either. Because at what point did just the $60 game not be enough if it had good sales and it was a good product like Jedi Fallen Order? When did that not become enough? When did the switch or the penny drop that they decided they had to start mixing it up in order to make more money? When did greed kind of take full effect? That I just can't quite wrap my head around that, because it was one way for so long and it worked, and now it's in recent years, this past generation and change, it's like all of a sudden we have to make more money and lots of it, which I can't quite wrap my head around.
You're not talking millions either; you're talking billions.
Yeah, and
how much money do you need to make?
Let's look at movies as well, Joe, because production value for movies has only increased, marketing for movies has only increased, yet we still get the standard package for relatively the same price.
Yeah.
So if Hollywood is able to sustain it, and again, this might be comparing apples and oranges, I don't understand why the gaming industry is having so many issues. Like, is there more greed present in the gaming industry, or is Hollywood more tightly managed because it all falls under Hollywood and there's only, a few big players there? Whereas the gaming environment is filled with publishers, right? All trying different things.
I think it might be something that's inherent to the gaming industry in as much as it has that potential for marketing. There is a potential there for marketing and monetization that isn't there in things like books, films, TV. The ability to actually shoehorn as much marketing as you like, as much monetization as you like into a video game has always been there. But I think with the development of things like FIFA, and when they came in and Andrew Wilson saw what they were doing with FIFA Ultimate Team and moving forward with that, I think that, it's, let's be honest, put me in that situation and they say to me, you can make, I don't know, pick a figure, 20 million, 100 million. You can make 100 million on this game, right? You can put this game out. It can sell gangbusters. You can make 100 million on it. Or you can put it out. It might make a little less on the actual sales. Maybe not. It might still make as much on the sales. But if you stick this microtransaction in and you stick this microtransaction in and you have a whole series of them and then you encourage your players to do it, you could make 1 billion. You could make 5 billion. If I was put in that situation and I was investing, maybe I would. Maybe I would want to have the billions instead of the millions. Maybe I would. And this is how insidious it is. I think it's both insidious for the gamer who's been taken down this route and been let's be honest, people have been manipulated into this kind of spending. But I think it's also insidious for the people who are investing as well, because when you're making more and more money hand over fist year in, year out, it must be very hard to turn it down. You know, or even just to slow down and say, let's put the brakes on here. This doesn't seem right. You know, everyone's got a price. And when you're already a billionaire, it's much harder to see life from an ordinary person's point of view. And if they can see that screwing money out of people makes them even more billions, it may not even cross their mind that they're doing harm in some instances. I'm sure some of them know. I'm sure Andrew Wilson and Bobby Kotick really do know that they're doing harm.
Absolutely.
But maybe, you know, but I mean, they don't care because they're making so much money.
Well, I mean, 2 points on this, right? I mean, I guess at some point we were probably organically already pulling our cards out to buy DLC or something honest, wholesome, right? Something that's worth our money. And I guess the point is the penny dropped when they realized that, oh, hang on, they're getting their cards out after they've already bought the game. How many more times can we get them to get their card out? Which I guess that's it, right? That's the beginning point. But my second point is, do you think the bottom line in greed, and I know we're getting way off topic, but do you think the bottom line in greed is worse with publicly traded businesses like EA?
Well, that's interesting because I would have normally said yes, but then you look at a company like Bethesda, which I don't think are a publicly traded company. I would say my inclination would be yes, just because of the way the market leads companies. I mean, there's almost an imperative there that they are
appease the shareholders,
obligated, to make more money. In some instances, it's actually a legal requirement that companies have to try and make more money. They can't actively lose money. I mean, I'm not a business expert or a business analyst, but that's the way I understand it. Especially if you've got investors like pension schemes and stuff like that. If they're, you're not supposed to actually undermine them. You're not supposed to make it so that they can't make as much money as they otherwise could. So I think there's a conflict of interest there straight away. But I don't know. I just companies have to have some obligation, some care of their customers, especially when you're looking at games, and we'll touch on this in a minute a bit more, especially when you're looking at games that are sold to kids, and I'm thinking of FIFA here. FIFA's sold, I think it's got a 3 and up age range. And yet, let's be honest, you can call it loot boxes, you can call it surprise mechanics, you can call it whatever the hell you like. Bottom line is, it is gambling. And you're selling that to children. And if you were doing that in any other way, it would be illegal. But they've found a loophole. And they're using that and they're squeezing as much out of it. And I think I've said this countless times, we're saving up problems for the future. And so something needs to be done. And we need regulation. I hate to say it, but we do.
Now, I guess, again, before we wrap it up, I'll ask you the same question. How do we fix this? Well,
as I just said, I think the only recourse now is regulation. I think it has to be regulated.
Well,
and it has to be seen as gambling, and it has to be sorted out. And these companies, I don't mind them making money. I don't mind that Bobby Kotick's a billionaire. I don't mind that Andrew Wilson's a billionaire. But there has to be limits, you know?
Well, I mean,
they have to be checked in some way.
Yeah, if we can have like a governing body, like I think it's called WASADA or something like that, like the anti-doping game for like the Olympics, and they can ban Russia. Why can't we have a governing body for video games that isn't controlled by borders or local legislation? Why, if Activision's being dicks or EA is being dicks with loot boxes, why can't we literally just brick wall their video games from entering the market?
Well, this is the problem. They've actually self-regulate. Oh well, self-regulate. It'll be fine. And who sits on the boards of these things?
Yeah,
people like Bobby Kotick and Andrew Wilson and Phil Spencer and people like that. That's who sit on these boards. Again, that's another conflict of interest. The regulatory body should be fully and totally independent of the companies. Yeah. If it's not, there's always going to be a conflict of interest. Simple as. I mean, you can't get away from it.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you, Joe, 100%. Like legislation. I mean, I would much rather see the industry come together as a whole and self-regulate itself without, any conflicts of interest, rather than kind of the localized efforts we've had recently, which is like, you see in the UK where you guys have been trying to like pull them up on loot boxes, and I think we tried it here, but it fell on its face. I would much rather see it come together as a whole rather than fractured like it has been. But, that's probably never going to happen.
I agree. And I mean, the industry has proven time and time again that it can't be trusted to regulate itself. Unfortunately, I would rather that they'd have done a good job and we could trust them, but they've proven time and time again that they can't be trusted. So, yeah. But anyway, I think we've done that one to death. Yep. So, Scuzzbag of the Year, who are we going to say? Blizzard, ultimately?
Sure.
Activision, EA?
Activision, all three of them. Done.
Yeah, let's put them on a pedestal up there
them
together. I mean, yeah, I would say so. EA and Activision, Blizzard, or Blizzard Activision. Right, so worst game of the year. We're going to touch on some of the same issues and try and keep this one short because we could go over the same old ground again. I've got a few written down here. Not played it, didn't like the previous one all that much, played it a bit. Ghost Recon Breakpoint, just because a lot of people were not happy with the way it went and they felt like it was a step backwards. I mentioned Crash Team Racing as well because of the loot boxes being added after the fact. I mentioned COD recently just added a kill-death ratio tracker for $20.
Yeah, I saw that. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Which looked a bit dodgy. But the one that really stands out for me, and I think this is because it's been ongoing for a couple of years now, is FIFA 20 Legacy Edition. And Legacy Edition tells you everything you need to know. FIFA 20 is basically exactly the same, and this is on the Switch specifically. FIFA 20 Legacy Edition on the Switch is basically a 2 or 3 year old almost game. And they have just put new rosters in and charged people full price. So basically you're buying the same game you bought last year for the same price you paid last year, and you're not getting any real upgrade in terms of gameplay, performance, or anything like that. It's the same bloody game. They've just shat it out the door, and they're thinking you lot are all a bunch of mugs, go and buy it. And that sums up EA for me. Doing that. When you look at some of the games that have come across to the Switch and some of the port jobs that have been done on the Switch, which are brilliant, and then you look at this lazy, half-assed, like cash grab, that's got to be the worst. Not necessarily in terms of gameplay, but just the whole package of a game. It's just a joke. So that to me, that.
Oh, sorry, Joe.
No worries. So, I mean, I don't know what you make of that, or if you've got anything that you think would come out as worse.
I can't disagree. I honestly, like, we discussed this before we started recording. It has been a relatively, you called it a flat year. I think that's a good way of describing it. Like, there hasn't necessarily anything that's like stood out. That's been great. There hasn't been necessarily anything that's really bad either. So I guess, it's hard to go past FIFA. I'm not that well versed in it, but it sounds terrible. What you've told me.
It's just the fact that they've, it's the same old game. I mean, it's like 2-3 years old and they've done nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I think one that I could probably put forward that would be incredibly controversial would be Death Stranding.
Don't give out your address, you're going to get lynched.
And I mean, not so much for like necessarily the game itself, but how it's kind of been portrayed and how his name slipped my mind now, the creator Kojima, how he's kind of like handled his PR as well, kind of interestingly and maybe not correctly. It's just been really weird. But I feel like that game has kind of overreached in a lot of ways.
Do you know what struck me about that game? Is for me, it's really, it reeks for me of Emperor's New Clothes. That's the problem for me. And look, I actually said on more than one occasion, I'm glad the game's out there. I don't want to see the end of it. I love it, the fact that we're getting diversity in gaming. There's all sorts of different stuff out there. But for me, and I can only go by what I've seen in terms of gameplay because I've not played it myself. I've only watched videos of people playing it and stuff like this. But for me, it looks incredibly pretentious.
Yep, 100%.
And I think a lot of people are defending it just because it's Kojima. And I think if Microsoft, say, the Gears guys of is it the Coalition?
Yep.
Say the Coalition had put out this game. Do you really think it would have got the same reception as it's had?
It would have been shat on. And you know what? I'll go
one further. It would have been crucified.
I'll go one further, Joe. Microsoft, Phil Spencer would have shut that shit down just like Scalebound.
Yeah.
100%.
And they would have been criticised for it, but,
Look, if you love it, power to you. And I'll even say I understand why you like it, right? Because it's funky, it's sci-fi, it's strange, it's different. I get that, 100%. But at the same time, I think it's an average game that still has a bit of intrigue and it's kind of interesting at the same time. But it's average in a lot of ways. And it's not the worst game of the year. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is kind of the circumstances surrounding it, I think kind of almost, in a lot of the ways, it's like a really average game that's really overreached. It's kind of like, it's when the hype train went the other way. You know, you know how you kind of overhype a game and it becomes a train wreck and the hype ruined it, right? Because it couldn't meet expectations. This is a game where the hype train just kept on fucking going past release, right? But we all realized it was like this weird kind of strange, in a lot of ways, average game that had a lot of negatives, but the hype train kept going and people kept getting on it.
And I think it is just because it's Kojima.
I think so too. But I think that's a big factor, but I think it is also because it is so different, so it's hard to put in a box. And because you can't be put in a box, I think people think it's good.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. And as I said before, and you said this as well, that we're not saying you shouldn't play it, you shouldn't enjoy it, all those kind of things. It's just the way people are making it out to be a 10 out of 10 game when it pretty obviously isn't, It's
almost like, I'll put it like this. Like, I have a movie series on at my local cinemas called Cult Classics, right? And a lot of the time they're movies that aren't necessarily good, but they have cult followings.
Yeah.
And you can tell why they have cult followings straight away, because they're quirky, they're different, they're unique. This is Death Stranding.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they're good, though.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And there will be people out there who genuinely love that game. That it will be their game of the year, it will maybe be their favourite game ever. But you'll be able to count them almost on the fingers of one hand, the genuine ones.
So
there will be a lot of other people jumping on it, and like I say, Emperor's New Clothes. They don't want to say, actually, I don't think much of this game. They won't. They can't bring themselves to say it. Partly because maybe they're a Sony fanboy, and it's that whole thing about. There's a thing in, and I might have mentioned this to you before. There's a whole thing in the sort of atheist circles about looking at religion. And a guy came out with the idea of the outsider's test of faith. And the idea is that you say, well, okay, you believe in this. So you believe that Jesus ascended. I keep saying descended when I mean ascended. Jesus ascended to heaven. He flew up to heaven. Okay, you believe that. Now, do you tell me that you think that Muhammad ascending to heaven on a winged horse is daft? Because if you think one's daft, really, when you look at it from the outsider's perspective, they both look daft to me. But a Christian would think it's fine for Jesus to do it, but he would think it was daft for Muhammad to do it.
Well, exactly. It's bias, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem. And you have to always try and take a step back from your own biases. I mean, you and I have to do this with the Xbox because we're both Xbox guys in many respects.
I would say that. If you had to say at heart, if something was at heart, I would say that's probably accurate.
Yeah. And so we have to work doubly hard not to be, ridiculously over the top about Microsoft and be too critical about Sony when, if Sony does something that Microsoft might have done, you don't criticize Sony for doing it and praise Microsoft for doing the same bloody thing because that's just not rational. But people do it all the time, and I think this is what's going on with Death Stranding. I think a lot of people aren't just not being rational about it. Yeah. There's people out there who've played the game and hated it, and they're still saying they think it's brilliant, and that's the problem.
Yeah, it's strange. That's the issue there. But I mean, I guess the direction I kind of took my worst game of the year in is maybe definitely not the worst, but perhaps the most interesting with regards to the scenario surrounding the game.
I agree with you on that. Yeah. I mean, and at the end of the day, this is all fairly subjective anyway. But it's definitely one that raised that whole thing about, it's like when people look at a pile of bricks and go, what a brilliant work of art it is. And I honestly think Kojima could have shat in a box and some people would be saying it's the best game ever.
Well, that's it. It's not even subjective, is it? Because... Well, it's not purely subjective because if you're an avid fan of Kojima, you have a bias. So It's not purely subjective. You couldn't just... If you removed Kojima from the equation and nobody had knowledge of him, then sure, absolutely. But it would be very interesting to see how much that number would drop if you did remove Kojima from the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's an interesting one. Are we really going to say that Death Stranding is the worst game of the year? No.
No, give it to FIFA, Joe.
Let's go and hide now.
I still think that... Should we even it out and we'll say Gears of War 5 was utter trash?
See, you and I have got slightly different opinions on this one because I actually enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. It didn't blow me away like the reboot of number 4 did, but it was interesting. Interesting direction.
Yeah, I like the new direction they're going with it. I hope they don't open it out too much with the next one. I hope they keep it similar, but they just need to flesh out the story a bit more, and the environments need to be a bit more busy. There needs to be a bit more going on.
Yeah, completely agree.
But yeah. I still think I'm going to go with FIFA though. FIFA 20 Legacy Edition.
I defer to you on this one. Let's go with FIFA.
I just hate the laziness of it, and there's no need for it. The Switch is quite capable of handling more, and if they wanted to put the effort in, but no, they don't want to put the effort in. They just want to shit something out the door and make money off it, and that sums up EA, and we're back to the Scuzz bag of the year. Anyway, moving on. We covered this somewhat in your Games of the Decade the other day that we all recorded, and I'll put a link into that if you guys are interested. Go and check out our Games of the Decade.
I think we coined it our top 30 because we were going with top 10 because we all picked 10 games, but it really did end up almost being our top 30 because we had almost no crossover, which was nice.
Yeah, I think there was a couple with me and Count. We crossed over a couple of times, but other than that, no, there weren't really. And so in that, obviously, we were going year by year, and we got to this year, and so we were discussing what we thought were our best games of this year at the end of that. And we were struggling somewhat, I think, because as I said before, and you mentioned it as well, that it's been a bit of a flat year, and for obvious reasons, because we're heading into the next generation, and next year is going to be the real excitement. But I chose mainly, and I said this at the time, I chose Control because it's the game that I've played the most. Going back to Gears, I enjoyed playing Gears, but Control it's just grabbed me, and it's a love-hate relationship as well with that game, because there are things about it I bloody hate, but there are things about it that I absolutely adore as well, and I love the environment, and I love the way it's created, the whole the weirdness of it, and the intrigue of the story, and there's something about that game that just really grabs me, and I love. I mentioned this in our video. I love the references to Alan Wake as well, and the fact that this is the nearest thing we've got so far to an Alan Wake sequel. Although there are some hints being made that we might see an Alan Wake sequel, which will be fantastic.
Yeah,
but so in a flat year, Control is pretty much my game of the year anyway, and I know not a lot of people will agree with me on that, but I think it's a great game.
I think that's a solid choice. It's very much one of those years where it's like there's been no standout, so it is kind of each to their own.
Yeah.
Obviously, Joe, mine was Death Stranding.
That would be an interesting one, wouldn't it? If a game was so crazy that it could be both your best and your worst.
Split me down the middle, yeah. A hype train drove through me, Joe. Yeah.
That does range. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm in this. I mean, when we got to the end of our kind of best games of the decade episode, 2019 honestly was my least interesting year, or even favorite years to pick from. Like, I had some ripper years in there where you really got to kind of really sift through some of the heavy hitters, and it's really hard to pick one. And there was only a couple years in there where it was like, I can't pick one because there's nothing that jumps out at me. And to me, 2019 is absolutely one of those years. And I think I actually ended up giving it to Apex Legends. And believe me, if you'd put that in any single one of these previous years of the decade, it would not have been anywhere near the top.
Yeah, you'd have forgotten about it.
Yeah, 100%. I played it in the first couple of months of this year. I loved it for 2 weeks, and it was gone just like that. And same with Gears of War 5. Gears of War 5's story didn't quite grab me. The multiplayer was good. It kind of fatigued on it a little bit though, over kind of so many games. There was a lot of things that just didn't quite jive with me with Gears of War 5. It's still a polished, good product. Still had an interesting story, and I want to see where we go, obviously. But it just didn't feel like enough. Like, it felt like an appetizer to the last entry in whatever is going to be the last entry of this series, the Gears of War 6. It just kind of felt like a to be continued, kind of a stop on the road until we got to the end. It just didn't do anything for me. So, and to be honest, Gears of War 5 is probably the biggest game I played this year, other than, Apex. And yeah, it's just nothing's grabbed me this year. So I think I need to try Control. I think I would like Controls. I think I'll have to give that a go before the year wraps up, but we're really close.
It's a real mind bender of a game.
Yeah.
It does do things very differently to most other games out there, I have to say. I love how different it is in many respects, but without being that up your arse, Kojima Death Stranding kind of different. It hasn't taken it so far along the line. I mean, it does a lot of things that other games have done, but there's backtracking in the game and stuff. But when you go back, things change. Oh, God, stuff really irritates me about the game, though, sometimes when you're trying to go in and you get these things flash up to tell you you're going to go in and you're in the middle of a firefight and something flashes up and tells you to clear out a base. And it takes your eye off, and then you end up getting killed because there's something flashed up on the screen to tell you some other mission has just come up.
Oh.
So there are things about it that irritate me, but yeah, it's a great game. And I mean, I did actually really enjoy my time with Gears, but it wasn't do you know, sometimes when you play a game, and like you said, there were games in that list that I couldn't stop waxing lyrical about. I mean, there's games like Edith Finch, there's games like Inside, and some of the bigger games as well that just sometimes they grab you and you can't stop talking about them. You want to evangelize for them to people. You want to say, you have to play this game. And there was nothing really. The closest this year was Control, but there was nothing really this year that made me want to evangelize it. That made me want to go, you have to play this. What do you mean you haven't played it? You have to play it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a bit of a flat year.
It's the end of a console generation. Next year will be a big year because we're going to get the new consoles and we're going to get those big titles that I think we're trying to hit both platforms, like your Cyberpunk.
Yeah, there's a lot coming out before the new consoles as well. I mean, it looks like we're getting a lot of stuff hitting thick and fast next year.
Yeah,
so it's all very exciting.
It's an easy double dip, new console generation. So, you'll see the games come out over the year and then bang, they'll re-release the HD deluxe versions for the new consoles. So
yeah. The Last of Us 2. So that'll be bought twice in this household, I expect.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just one of those things, It's the end of a generation, end of a decade, end of a generation. So it's going to be a quiet year.
And talking of which, with the new consoles coming, I want to get onto the company of the year. Now, last year I titled this Publisher or Developer of the Year, but I was having a bit of a hard time finding a publisher or developer as such that stood out. So I kind of renamed it to Company of the Year. And the two companies that struck me and their platform holders were Nintendo and Microsoft this year. I think they've both done fantastic stuff generally this year. But before I get into that, is there anyone that really stands out for you?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to be at danger of sounding like a biased fanboy again, but I would probably definitely give it to Microsoft. I think they're hard to go past over at least probably the last 2 to maybe 3 years, because they're doing a lot. They're getting active, and they've been active for a long time. And they're finally getting a lot right, because, look, maybe this will bring some balance to this, because we all know earlier in the generation they did almost everything wrong. So
you want an offline console? Buy a 360.
And I mean, we'll probably end up at that point one day anyway. But how they're going about it is in a lot of ways pro-consumer. And they're doing a lot of interesting things, and they're trying to actually fix what they know is criticisms of theirs, which is like first-party games. They've gone out of their way to assemble entire new, to build new studios and to acquire new studios and put them all under the Microsoft Studio Games banner. And they've been doing that over the last 18 months. And actually, I think it's probably almost a couple of years now, isn't it? They started acquiring studios. But we're starting to see, the fruits of those acquisitions come through now. Like, look at Outer Worlds, which, again, I know that's kind of an in-betweener because it was already in development before they bought it, but whatever, right? It's still a studio they've gone out and acquired, and a quality studio too. But, everything from like Project xCloud and it being like a kind of an honest service. Like, it's not costing money, and it is delivering in a lot of ways already. It's pro-consumer. They want to get people on board. They want people to try it. It's not kind of motivated by the bottom line like Google Stadia is from day one. Game Pass. They're doing a lot of things right, and a lot of things that are interesting as well. We can talk about the upcoming consoles and next generation. They're just an interesting space to watch, and I think they have been that way for the last 2 to 3 years. So I don't know if that necessarily qualifies them for kind of company or business of the year, but they're certainly interesting. And I would probably give it to them over Nintendo just because I think they are being so proactive and vocal about a lot of exciting stuff.
I just think that the number of announcements we've had from Microsoft this year in terms of their primarily services, but also games as well. We had back at, I think it was E3 when they announced Game Pass. Was it E3? I can't remember. So much has happened. We had Game Pass Ultimate when we got Game Pass Ultimate announced, and they incorporated that into Game Pass. So now you've got your games going across PC and Xbox, and you've got crossplay there, and you've got your game saves go across both platforms as well, and it's all seamless. And I made a video about this, about the, when they came out with the cloud stuff back at the beginning of the generation, and it was all bollocks, and they made so many ridiculous claims. But when you come fast forward to now and you look at what's going on with the way they're using the cloud, for game saves, and it's so much more seamless than Sony, and I'm not even going to mention Nintendo because they can't do that stuff at all well.
Yeah.
But you've got Game Pass Ultimate, and now they're going to incorporate next year. If you've signed up for it, you can get it now. But they've got xCloud coming to that. Then we got the announcement at the Game Awards of the Xbox Series X, and we see, everyone was giving them stick about, you've bought Ninja Theory, and now what are they doing? They're putting out some crappy, online shooter. And then what happens? We get to the Game Awards, and we've got Hellblade 2 come in, and that was utterly brilliant. The whole presentation was just gorgeous. Yeah. And for the first time this year, literally for the first time this year, and let's be honest, the Game Awards was bloody boring generally, but that section of the Game Awards, I sat there and my jaw hit the floor. I was and let's turn this around a second and say, if Sony had done it, my jaw would have hit the floor too. This isn't me being a Microsoft fanboy. If we'd have got the PlayStation 5 shown then, and one of the games that was going to be on the PlayStation 5, and they'd done it in a great presentation. And let's be honest, Sony can do great presentations. We've seen it from them before. If it had been Sony doing that, my jaw would have hit the floor too. But the way that was done, I was wow, this is, and I went and I watched the Hellblade 2 trailer, and I've watched it like 5-6 times now, and I played it to even my partner who's a non-gamer. It was mind blowing, and I was so excited because I love Hellblade anyway, and to see that this is going to be a bigger, bolder expression of that universe. I can't wait. Honestly, I cannot wait. And so all the services, you said this, all the services, the game studio acquisitions, the announcement of the Xbox Series X. And the look of it, let's be honest, some people hate it. And my mate was going, people are taking a mickey out of it. And I said, well, only Sony fanboys. Whether you like the look of it or not, and I do, but it's bold. It's a really bold statement. And I think Microsoft have been doing that a lot this year. Really, they're being really bold and saying, look, this is what we're doing. This is what we've got. Bring it on, let's see what Sony can do now.
They're trying to actively shake things up, but they're not just talking shit. They're actually walking their talk. It's incredible to watch in a lot of ways. But that's it, isn't it? Like, they're shaking things up, and for once, the whole shaking up of the industry is actually almost a good thing, because we're going in a lot of new interesting directions now, which is, I think, exactly why we have to give it to them this year for, Company of the Year. Like, it's just because they're shaking things up in a way that's interesting, and a lot of it is pro-consumer.
Yeah, and they're shaking it up, and they're going to be bringing all their games that are currently available into the new platform, and and they've told us this up front. It's all going to come with us. You should be able to unplug your hard drive from your Xbox One X and take it to your Series X and plug it in. It should work. There's some interesting things about how that will work because the loading times on the new consoles and all the rest of it, but we won't get into that here. But if you compare that to Stadia, they are shaking the industry up. They are changing things, but they're not leaving the old way of doing things completely behind. So they're doing it right this time. Whereas before, if you go back to the beginning of this generation, they were trying to force us to do it their way. It was like their way or the highway, take it or leave it. And that's not what they're doing now. They're trying to take us with them. And it feels really positive, I have to say.
Yeah. It's a completely different approach because they're actively trying to make I would call it like access points into their ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's everywhere, whether it be, what device do you want to play on? Do you want to play on one of these 3 different Xboxes? They all can hit your different preferred price ranges and capabilities that you want out of the machine. Do you want 1080p or do you want the 4K machine box? Do you not even want to buy hardware? Do you want to play on xCloud? How do you want to consume your games? Do you want to treat it like a Netflix subscription? There's so many different avenues of access now that they're trying to kind of spread out into. It's incredible. It's incredible to watch. Like, who would have thought that only one generation ago, our only means of access was one console? Pick which one you want. Do you want the PlayStation or do you want the Xbox? And more often than not, you had to have physical media because the internet wasn't good enough. Just to look back towards 360 and PS3, even the end of those generations to now, is like, it's a staggering difference. And I think Microsoft are to thank for that in a lot of areas.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, if you look at what they're doing even with the hardware moving forward, I mean, they're going to release this new controller. It's going to have a share button, which they admitted, well, we didn't invent that, but it's a good thing and it works, so we're going to incorporate it. Good on you. But even, the new controller is going to work with the new Xbox. It's also going to work with the Xbox One X, the Xbox One S, and even the original Xbox One.
Awesome.
It's going to work with your PC. And not only that, your current controllers are going to work with the Series X as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're not forcing you to buy new hardware you don't necessarily want or need. So
it's just...
Yeah,
I mean, it's just brilliant. It's like, this is what you want when you're moving into a new generation. They're limiting how much. I mean, obviously the hardware is going to be expensive, but they're not forcing. I mean, I've got a whole load of Xbox One controllers. I can use them on the new machine. It's brilliant.
Yeah,
and me being me, I'll go out and buy all the different special editions that I can afford anyway because I'm an idiot. But I don't have to.
Yeah,
and that's great. And I love that. I think they've done so many good things. I just hope they keep on in this direction. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and I think the real thing we have to thank for this is like, yes, Microsoft is being bold, right? Blah blah blah, right? But I think ultimately we have to thank the new subscription model for this, because the subscription model, Microsoft knows, kind of the digital future and subscription model is the way of the future. So they're not worried about, making money on the hardware and trying to like wring as many pennies out of people as they can on new boxes. And they're not worried about making people have to buy all the new controllers and get rid of all their old shit. Like, that doesn't matter anymore. Be as generous as you want or as generous as you can be, because all that matters is getting their subscription.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So in a lot of ways, like, it might, take the sugar off, right? This is the reason why they're doing it. But it doesn't always happen that it cuts both ways, where we win and they win, which is where we want to be. Yeah,
that's exactly right. I mean, it's a perfect balance, isn't it? As long as they keep that balance right and they don't get greedy, which, let's be honest, they could do. If they do brilliantly, the next generation, they could end up, deciding that they're going to screw us.
Yeah, that's the
because
cycle,
they do go in cycles. Yeah, we've seen this with Sony, where they messed up. So then this generation, they did a lot of good stuff. So let's hope that they don't let it go to their heads and they keep on in that direction, and they're very pro-consumer. And if we look at what's happening with Sony, it's already pushing Sony more down that route, I think. If you look at, they're already talking about backwards compatibility with the PlayStation 4 onto the PlayStation 5. That wouldn't have happened if Microsoft hadn't have pushed it.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I'm really excited for next gen, and I'm excited for the PlayStation 5 as well. But I just think that what Microsoft are doing is it's exciting me. It genuinely is exciting me.
Yeah. I 100% agree, Joe. 100% agree. Everything down to the form factor of this new console, and even, what this form factor alone will offer, in terms of how noisy it's going to be and cooling. That alone is like a big win. So, but I'll tell you right now, and this is a little bit off topic, I'm so excited to see what the form factor of the PS5 is going to be.
Oh yeah, me too.
Will they go, because I think that will indicate, that'll indicate whether or not Microsoft's choice of form factor is because of the hardware that's gone into it'll be an indication. The form factor will. I've lost train of thought. The hardware, what's gone into. I'm getting too excited. What's gone into the machine? Like, obviously, is the hardware so kind of, beefy? Because we know these consoles are probably more beefy. Well, they are more beefy than what released at the beginning of this generation in terms of what the hardware was available at the time. They're far beefier systems, so they're probably generating a lot more heat. So, is this form factor because of heating, or are they just trying to be bold? So, I think, depending on what Sony come out with, I think that'll answer that question. If Sony follows a similar form factor, it's probably a cooling thing. But if they kind of go with the typical, looking flat horizontal VCR type thing, then we know it's Microsoft just being wacky, which I think is cool as well. I think it's a win-win again. So, we got to stop talking about Microsoft, Joe. I'm losing my train of thought. I'm getting too excited.
It is exciting, though. And I mean, we've got the PlayStation 5 coming. We've got rumours of a Nintendo Switch Pro as well. And going back to Nintendo, because I mentioned them at the beginning of this little bit, props for Nintendo with the Switch Lite, because when I heard about the Switch Lite initially, I wasn't at all sold by it. And I bought one because, it's me, and I bought one to try it out and see what it was like. And the reality is that you and I both love the bloody thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so, they've done well with that. And if they bring that same kind of thought to a Switch Pro, and there's all sorts of stories going around about the Switch Pro maybe being a home console only, I'm not sure I'm down with that. Unless they went with a home console and then the Switch Lite, so you could have both, but then that's extra expense. So I don't know where they go with that. But it is exciting. Next year is bloody exciting, and I can't wait. Honestly, I can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost want to rush to E3.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see if we hear anything from Sony before E3, because I was listening to somebody talking about that the other day and saying if Sony do something before E3, that might make Microsoft come with something before E3 as well, so as they don't get left with that period between sort of the early part of the year and E3 where Sony have all the attention. Because at the moment, all the attention's on Microsoft after the Game Awards.
Well, do you want to do a prediction, Joe?
Yeah, go on then.
My prediction is Sony will cut straight past the kind of teaser reveal, and they'll go for a full PS5 reveal in the first quarter of next year. How's that?
Yeah, I don't think that's beyond the pale, actually. I think that's possibly likely.
Remember that weird Mark Cerny reveal they did on the PlayStation Pro?
Yeah.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah, wasn't that...
Yeah.
Was that March?
Something weird like that. Yeah, it was a weird time of year. They got out in front of the Scorpio, I think it was called at the time.
Yeah, well, Scorpio came out later, didn't it? Came out the following year, so
I reckon they were
definitely ahead of the.
They'll straight up jump the gun and get in front of E3.
Yeah, I think they will. I think Microsoft have done this deliberately now, because leading up to Christmas, everyone's going to be talking about the Xbox Series X, and then into January, people are still going to be talking about the Series X, and so Sony, almost certainly, they're going to drop something in the early part of the first quarter of next year. I'd be very surprised if they don't.
Well, I don't think Sony want to talk about it yet, because why would you when your console's still selling incredibly well? Whereas what has Microsoft got to lose? Fucking nothing. The Xbox One stopped in sales a long time ago. Like, it's been crawling, right? So, and I mean, it's not necessarily.
Although they did do really well here over Christmas.
Yeah,
over the Black Friday period.
I mean, it's not the Xbox One X's fault. It's relatively, expensive still in comparison to the grand scheme of console prices. But we're still kind of in that awkward period of not quite getting the big AAA sellers on the platform yet. That's going to come. So, but Microsoft have nothing to lose. When you're the underdog, it's time to be bold, and that's exactly what they've been doing. So,
yep, exactly. And I mean, I think we've pretty much covered. I was going to say about let's have a look at some other news stories that more general news stories that we haven't covered yet. But I think I don't know about you. If there's anything specific that you want to drop in to this section, then feel free to do so. But failing that, I mean, we can move into what we've already been covering to some degree anyway, is what we are hoping to see for next year, and what we expect from these new consoles.
I think the only other shout out I would like to throw in terms of news this year that was pretty big. We don't have to spend a lot of time on these can just be bullet pointy, which is Bungie split from Activision. I think that's a big one for Bungie.
I think that's good for Bungie.
And also I think kind of like a time, kind of, I guess this almost ties in with like the end of an era and a decade, and that's Reggie leaving Nintendo. So that was a big one.
That was a big one. I was going to say he's missed, but he was there at the Game Awards, so
yeah,
he's still there or thereabouts.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that was about it. Really, I think I don't think you can really understate kind of how much Reggie has been through for Nintendo, through good and bad. So
yeah,
and all round seems like a genuine guy in terms of being a gamer. Like, seems to be passionate about it, which is more than you can say for a lot of people in the industry. So
yeah, absolutely. Andrew Wilson, Bobby Kotick.
Yep. Just a couple.
Yeah. We won't even go into the Borderlands guy. What's his name? But there's a lot of weirdos out there.
Randy Pitchford.
Yeah. Dear old Randy.
Yeah.
Randy by name.
Yeah, that's not a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean that's good. I mean, there was the guy who left Sony as well. That was a bit of a surprise move. I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
I did a video about this. I ought to know.
God. Yeah, slipped my mind now.
Yeah.
Not Andrew House.
No.
I was reading about him just the other day as well. Completely slipped.
Yeah. I'll stick a caption in if I remember. But that was a bit of a surprise actually. That came out of left field because we weren't expecting to see that one. But
well, yeah, seemingly there's been a bit of a reshuffle at Sony, so it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean that could be for good or for ill. It'd be interesting to see.
You don't know, do you?
Where they go with that. So anyway, let's just swiftly move on because we're heading very rapidly towards our hour and a half. We've already touched on this to some extent for next year, but what else is there that you're looking forward to? What are your hopes and what are your fears for next year?
Oh boy. Okay, I think my biggest fear for next year is Nintendo having a flat year. And I know you could probably go a lot worse than that, but I don't think we need to because I think we know that's going to be present anyway, which is the usual antics of EA and Activision and blah, 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 right?
Yeah,
that's always going to be
there. Yeah.
I'm not even going to waste my breath on it anymore. So I think that is my fear, Nintendo having a bit of a flat year and that also rolling into the release of new consoles. So I think they have their work cut out for them next year in terms of keeping the hype train going and the positivity going surrounding the Switch.
Do you think we could see a Switch Pro next year?
My gut says I'm a little bit torn on it. I think my brain says they probably should, but Nintendo have never... I don't think Nintendo in recent years have ever responded to new competition with hardware. They've always fallen outside the cycle with competitors.
Yeah.
I don't think they want to release new hardware around the same time as Switch and Xbox. I think they'll do it when they know it will be best for them. So I don't... I'm going to say I don't think they will, but at the same time I think they almost should. I think it would be good for positivity around the Switch if they did, but I don't think they will because I don't think it's going to make a lot of financial sense for them because it's a packed... Joe, at the end of next year, there could be 4 different systems to choose from to buy if both Sony and Microsoft release 2 systems each. So,
oh, God, yeah. I mean, it's going to be insane. I mean, this is why I look at Tommy Tallarico and his new console that he's releasing tail end of next year, and I'm thinking this is going to sink without trace if he's not careful.
Yeah, so, I mean, you can't really peg it because even if they do release a new Switch Pro, for example, what does that do for them? The new consoles are still going to radically outpace them. So are they just releasing a new system that's going to service the audience that like the Switch, or are they releasing it to draw in a new audience?
The only excuse me, the only thing I can think of is maybe if they are going to release one next year, I think they'd be better off releasing it around the same sort of window as they did with the original Switch, which is earlier in the year. And I think the reason they might do it, I don't think they will, I agree with you, but the reason they might do it is that would give them the option at least to stay a little closer to the other consoles, in as much as it would allow them to have more third-party games. Because once the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 come out, the ability to port games across to the Switch is going to be almost non-existent, certainly for the bigger games.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they may want to try and stay a little bit closer to keep the third party up there. But like you say, this is Nintendo, and if they've got a fair few first party games come in that are gonna, keep people interested, then they may not bother. And they may wait and come 2021, 2022 or something.
Well, that's just it. I don't know that they do that. I think they've I mean, they released Pokemon this year, Like, what's going to beat Pokemon next year? Like, Luigi's Mansion as well, Link's Awakening, 3 big games right there,
We know that Zelda is, we've got another Zelda coming, but that's going to be a few years off yet, I think.
Yeah.
We've got Metroid. We know Metroid's in development, but that's a way off yet as well, I think.
Yeah, I honestly don't know, Joe. I honestly really don't know as far as any kind of Switch Pro goes. I feel like it doesn't make sense for them to release it at anywhere near the second half of next year, or the last quarter of next year. It just doesn't make sense. Because the Switch, if you're just calling it a Switch Pro and it's not something really fresh, I don't think the interest is going to be there. People are going to want the new hardware from the big boys, like the heavy hitters. Yeah. They want to see what the next iteration of real next-gen power is.
From what we've seen so far, it's going to be pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to peg Nintendo down anyway. It could be a Switch Pro or it could be a Switch 2. We don't know. Yep. If it's a Switch 2, if to be honest, it almost makes more sense for it to be a Switch 2 and just almost wait, ride it out, try to get some good first IPs out, and then just release it 2021. The Switch successor, something really fresh. But yeah, I don't know. So back to my concern, it's definitely for Nintendo and keeping pace into a year, which is all going to be about building hype for Sony and Microsoft.
Yeah, I don't know. With Nintendo, you might as well flip a coin with Nintendo. You never know what they're going to do. I sometimes wonder if they know what they're going to do. I'm sure they do, but the way it is, you don't know. You don't know, and then that's for good and ill, because great things come out of that. The left field things that they do, you just don't know what's coming. So I think being able to predict them is,
it's like playing Rain Man, or trying to tell the weather. You can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is
you
there
may as
room,
well get some sticks and do the I Ching for what?
if you'd asked me, now, like, time's right for a Switch Pro, like right now. We almost probably could have gotten a Switch Pro instead of them just doing a refresh of the original hardware.
I would have liked to have seen that this year.
Fucking drop the Lite and drop the Pro and go into 2019, right?
Yep.
Like, just run with it all through. Give the 2 iterations, the lower end and the high end, because you've already got the middle squared away. But now it's the timing's too awkward. I don't think they can do it next year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only way they could maybe get away with it is if they release it early. But with a lot of games and stuff coming next year, maybe that's going to be difficult. And they're going to have a limited window. So the hype around the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X is just going to be too much, I think.
Yeah.
But, who knows? It's Nintendo. As regards the PlayStation 5... I mean, what do you think? I mean, we've already said that we think that we'll see something from them early in the year. Do you honestly think there's going to be a lot of difference between the hardware, between the Xbox and the PlayStation?
I mean, I think the only difference would be something to do with maybe load times. You know, like kind of the algorithms behind load times or something stupid like that.
Sorry interrupting, but have you heard about the stuff with the Xbox loading stuff? I heard something the other day about this. The idea is that you get your game and you're downloading your game, but they're talking about using the cloud so that, and if this comes to pass, then great, so that you can actually play the game almost straight away. So in effect, it will be streaming until it's installed.
Okay, well, that's
which means there will be no loading times at all in terms of, no wait times in terms of installation.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which I think is a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the very least, you could jump into some multiplayer and have a less than ideal kind of experience, but at least it's something while you wait for it to actually physically install to your machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm all for that. So, yeah. But, I mean, back to your original question, I honestly think it'll be a bee's dick between the two of them. I think it'll be even closer than what it was this generation. Because let's be honest, like the hardware was almost the same. It was super bloody close this generation, and the only real detractor was, and the only real difference was made by the Kinect and how much internal resources it was hogging. There was a couple
and the extra price.
Yeah, and there was a cut somewhere where the PlayStation 4 definitely had it over the Xbox. Might have been it wasn't the GPU, it must have been the CPU or something. They made it might have been RAM or something. They made a cut somewhere to kind of cut back the cost to get the Switch cost to fit into that price.
The PlayStation had better RAM, definitely.
Yeah, I think that was it. But no, I think this generation it's going to be almost identical. And the only thing
I agree. I mean, you look at the specs
Hmm.
that we've seen so far, the released specs and the stuff they're talking about and what they're talking about using, and it's all AMD. It's all.
Yep.
I'd be surprised. Other than the actual design internally of the way they lay it out, the CPU and GPU, I wouldn't be at all surprised. They're almost identical.
Yeah. And I think the only difference will be the coding and the algorithms that go into the boxes and how they might outperform each other in different areas because of the coding. I think it's going to be neck and neck. And I mean, like, how can it not be though? I mean, let's be honest. All these consoles are manufactured probably in Foxconn factories somewhere in China anyway. So if you think those places are airtight in terms of secrecy of hardware, like, get fucked. Like they're probably all openly trading backward and forward with each other anyway. And Microsoft and Sony are probably like, yeah, we don't like that, but really they're okay with it because they know what each other are doing and they're okay to be on the same page in terms of hardware because it means it's safe for both of them.
Yeah. Well,
So, I don't know.
somebody else said this about the reality is the hardware that's out there is the hardware that's out there. It's not like some alien has come down and landed on Sony's headquarters and said, here's this technology from 200 years hence, make a console out of that. The reality is that they're both working with the current technology we have. You can't get beyond that. You can have slight differences, but you're not going to have massive differences if you're using the same CPU, same GPU, and pretty much everything else is the same as well.
Yeah.
Same RAM, probably.
I mean, that's it. If you're using AMD or an NVIDIA, you're locked into pretty specific technology generations, right? And I mean, there can be some variation. You could get the high-end something, but if you get the high-end something, you're probably not going to fall within that price bracket that generally Microsoft and Sony always try to hit. So unless one of them is planning on being fucking a lot more expensive than the other one, they're probably almost identical.
I agree. And I think price-wise, they're going to be similar as well.
Yeah, I think neck
very
and neck,
close.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah. And so it'll be a case of what release games do you have? Does backwards compatibility appeal to you? Do the services they offer appeal?
Well,
that's what it's going to come down to. And I mean, I haven't got a horse in this race because I'm going to get both anyway. So,
Yeah, I'm very, very excited to see what PlayStation bring to the table.
I am.
I feel like they are somebody that probably should be trying to be a little bit bold now, not just rest on this generation that's on its way out. Because I guess one of my other biggest fears for this year is Sony could easily become a little bit stagnant. Some of their
that's my biggest worry for Sony.
Yeah, some of their IPs are getting a little bit up there in numbers. let's be honest, a lot of the services that Microsoft are bringing to the table are infrastructure and server based, which Sony cannot compete with. So
No.
what are they going to bring to the table? They're probably bringing the same hardware as Microsoft to the table. So they're going to have to rest on their IPs again, which we know that can work because we've seen it work for Nintendo before. But will it work in a world where Microsoft is also bringing good IPs next generation and all the other services?
Well, that's the difference. I think Microsoft are going to have good IPs next generation, whereas they haven't really this gen.
And everything else. So I guess that, I wouldn't be like shitting kittens if I was Sony, but I would definitely be wanting to be bold and make an impact with as much and everything as I can.
I think they need to, for me, Sony need to, when the PlayStation 5 releases, they need to have some good quality games pretty much day one, and certainly in through the next 6 months to a year. Because when the PlayStation 4 released, they didn't have a great deal to start with.
No.
I actually think that the games that came from Microsoft early on, certainly in the first year, were marginally, that neither of them were anything special, to be honest, but the Xbox games were marginally better in the first year, maybe first 18 months. And then Sony started ramping it up and we started seeing more and more and more from them, whereas Microsoft just stayed flat and we didn't get very much.
Yep.
And then we started getting cancellations and stuff like that. This time, I think Microsoft are going to come with some games. I think they're going to come with some quality product. And given that, for me anyway, I think that Microsoft's services are more robust and the hardware is not going to have a lot of difference, as you say, I think that Sony are going to have to, they're going to have to bring the noise, if you like. They're going to have to come with some, at least maybe 2 really solid heavy hitters. And let's be honest, it's not something they'd have any trouble doing because they've got the IPs. They've got plenty of good studios.
Mm-hmm.
If the PlayStation 5 hits with 2, 3, 4 top games, I can't imagine 4, but maybe 2 or 3 top games, either within the, on the release or within the first couple of months of the release window, I think then that's going to sell a lot of consoles straight away running up to the Christmas period.
I'll give you a prediction right now. Their launch games, their 2 heavy hitters will be the return of Gran Turismo, the return to form, and Horizon Zero Dawn 2.
Yeah, and if that is the case, then that'll definitely sell the console.
But
because
I mean, this is the thing for Sony though, because they are resting on, again, their messaging. I believe the messaging again will be keeping it simple: games, and they have to deliver on that. They have to,
absolutely,
and the competition is going to be a lot harder this next generation. So they have to really one up. They have to one up themselves again in terms of first party IP. Otherwise, I don't see how they can compete, because Microsoft has spent the entire second half of this generation gearing up for the next one and rectifying all of their issues. So, I mean, I said maybe they shouldn't. They probably not shitting kittens, but maybe they should be shitting kittens. If you can't compete with them because all the services are like kind of server based, they really need to triple down on the games. And I mean, let's be honest.
Do you know what's really going to help them though?
To play games. Sorry, Joe, yes.
You know what's really going to help them though? The fact that they have been the by far biggest seller this gen, and that they are going to release the PlayStation 5 with backwards compatibility for PlayStation 4. That makes it much more of a no-brainer for all those people who have a PlayStation 4 to go out and buy a PlayStation 5.
Yeah, 100%.
Because all the games that they currently have will work on that system.
Yeah.
And if, as the rumour suggests, they might be adding more games from, PlayStation 1, 2, 3, maybe even. If that does happen, then that's going to be great. But I don't for a minute agree with somebody was going on about the PlayStation 5 is going to have every single game from the PlayStation on it. That's not going to happen. That simply can't happen because of the issues with publishing rights.
Yeah, it would be a miracle for that to happen.
Oh God, it's just not doable. I mean, they'd have had to spend the entire time, this generation, going and seeing people and trying to work out deals so they're ready to go.
Wow.
Because some of those rights and the licensing they're out in the ether. They don't even know who owns the rights to some of these things. And then you've got music issues. We saw this with Alan Wake. Alan Wake got taken off Steam, didn't it? Because the music rights had lapsed. So they couldn't sell it anymore. I think it's back on there now. Maybe they must have sorted it out. But you get this all the time. The idea, and this is why we haven't seen every single Xbox game from the original Xbox through the 360 on the Xbox One. There are other reasons as well, but that's one of the main reasons. I read an interview with GOG, the guys who, the CD Projekt Red people, basically their storefront. And they were talking about going out because they've got a lot of old PC games on their service. And they were talking about how they have to, they spend an awful lot of time going out and trying to get rights because sometimes the rights have lapsed to a family member who has no interest at all in games and can't be asked and can't be bothered to sign the rights away or, to do a deal or whatever. And other times it's really easy. But it's an incredible amount of work before you even get to the porting across. And that might be easy with the PlayStation 1 and 2, but it's going to be harder with the PlayStation 3. So the idea that PlayStation is going to have every single PlayStation game from their history is just pie in the sky. It's nonsense.
Well, it's insane. It's definitely, it would be, I mean, like you said, look at everything Microsoft has done with backwards compatibility with the original Xbox. And look what they've achieved a lot. But that's taken them more than a generation to do. So I can't see Sony having spent the same amount of time in recent years but not talking about it.
No, me neither. Especially when they've been coming out and saying we're not interested in backwards compatibility.
They've been getting criticised left, right and centre about it as well. So that just seems stupid. I mean, it'd be amazing. And it would certainly be the kind of splash they need.
We will see PlayStation 4 backwards compatibility, I've no doubt. Because that's just good business. And we may see some PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, how they do it. They might do it through PlayStation Now. They may make it so you can buy them again. I did hear that you won't be able to use the discs, in which case that's a missed opportunity. I think I don't see any reason why you couldn't, if you've got a disc-based console, why you couldn't just stick your discs in and play them. I don't understand that. You can do it with the Xbox. But, whatever. But PlayStation 4 games will. PlayStation 4 games are going to work on the PlayStation 5. If they don't, I will eat my own foot. And that's going to give them an advantage, I think. That's going to be one of their big advantages because of the install base they've already got. And a lot of those people will be looking to the PlayStation rather than the Xbox. And the Xbox has to convince people, whereas the PlayStation doesn't. So the PlayStation has, Sony have to drop the ball, I think. So I think Microsoft are going to do a lot better this next generation. I think it's going to be a lot closer. But I still think Sony are probably going to be in the driving seat, certainly early on. Yeah,
I think definitely. Well, I mean, some of the goodwill, I guess, from this generation will roll straight over, like you said.
Absolutely.
If they open with like something like a really sexy racing game like Gran Turismo and Horizon Zero Dawn as your launch titles, and probably The Last of Us re-released in some kind of better deluxe package. It's going to have a good release. But I mean,
absolutely.
I don't know what Microsoft to bring to the table. I mean, Halo 6 could knock people's socks off because that's a game that's 5 years in development. I think already. So that's a long time for any game. Like that's in the realms of RPG level of development or GTA level of development. So whatever they're bringing to the table, I think they're intending it to be a big splash. Like this Halo 6 for Microsoft is now a case of now or never in terms of getting it back on track. If it doesn't get back on track after this, well, I mean, it's hard to imagine
taking a hiatus.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine an Xbox without Halo, but I think it'll definitely be on the ice. So and I imagine they'll be probably bringing another Horizon and probably some new stuff as well. Probably some new big heavy hitters too, I'd imagine. So I think their launch.
Do you think we'll see Fable in the launch window?
Oh, I think absolutely. There was some concept art that was recently leaked regarding Fable, and quickly taken down. So I think we'll definitely see Fable. I would not be surprised if that's a launch game either. So maybe they're going back to their DNA. They're going to launch it with Halo. They're going to launch it with Fable. And who knows? Maybe Forza.
We'll see Forza, I expect, on release. Because that's out of a year's break, so that's well in production.
So I would not be surprised if in that kind of first release window, like maybe the first 6 months, we'll get some of the pillar original hits from Xbox and then probably see some of the stuff from some of the new studios. And I know that sounds like a lot to release probably in the first kind of even year, but I think it's what they need to do. They need to hit a home run in that first year for this next generation. They need to start strong and build that.
And let's not forget, those games are going to come on Game Pass day and date as well, so they can sell the Xbox with Game Pass. They're not going to have to buy those games. You get a subscription to Game Pass. You might even get 3 months in the box. In effect, you'll just be paying for the price of the console, and you'll have all those release date games ready to go.
Yep.
So that's a pretty good selling point. That's going to be quite enticing for people, I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting on both sides of the fence. So, yeah,
absolutely.
I think Microsoft...
And we both said it already, and I'm going to say it again. I cannot wait.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Microsoft has everything to win and Sony has everything to lose. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this all pans out. I mean, who knows? Like, maybe they both do really well. Yeah, that would be nice for a change.
That'd be awesome. I'd love them to see... can you imagine if they're like 50-50 all the way through the next generation?
That would be
Can you imagine how it pushes them both?
Oh, it would be good. It would be good watching them try to up the ante. But I mean, I don't know. It's so strange. I mean, having said that, I mean, like, Microsoft fell on their faces. Completely on their faces. And
please, I hope they don't do that again.
And they're going harder than anyone. So maybe 50-50 doesn't push them any harder. Like, maybe it's just like, they're probably like, all right, cool. They just keep doing their thing. But it's going to be interesting. So very interesting.
Last one. Do you think Stadia will still be around next year?
At what point next year?
Well, when the new console's released, do you think it's still going to be up and running and... I'll be honest, I think it will.
Yeah, I think it will. In what way, shape, or form, I don't know. What if they
I think it's going to struggle next year when the new consoles release. I really do.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't... It'll be there, but I would have to imagine it's going to be radically different. Like, it has to be performing better, and it has to be an overhauled service.
I agree.
And it has to be exciting. It needs games. It needs a lot of... Maybe Google start making games. Maybe they start announcing...
They've said they've started a studio, but they said they started the studio when they announced Stadia. So it's like they were making the studio, hadn't even started making games. So that's the problem for me. That's what they need. I mean, listen to us two going on about Sony and Xbox and even the Switch. We're getting excited about it, and yet you mentioned Stadia, and it's will they still be here?
You legitimately cannot find a reason.
No.
That's the issue.
Yeah, exactly. Next year's very exciting, but not for somebody who's only got Stadia. Let's be honest.
It doesn't even have games, Joe. Like,
no.
It's the only people I see trying Stadia out now is people that are like mildly curious.
Yeah. I think most of the people who bought the bloody Founders Pack were YouTubers.
I could totally see that being the case. Like,
just
tech enthusiasts,
Yeah. I'll show this on my channel. I'll get it. It's 130 quid or whatever it was. I'll get it 130 quid. I'll show it on my channel. I'll get some views. Bish bash bosh. Another video out the window,
Yeah, it's
I mean,
totally bizarre.
that's we've already covered this, but I can't see it really appealing to many people. And like I say, next year it could just sink without a trace once we see the new consoles arrive.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got, if you're a casual gamer, you've got your phone, you've got the Switch. I mean, hardcore gamers as well on the Switch, but it's got a broad appeal. That's why it's done so well. The Switch appeals, across the board. If you're a bit more hardcore, you've got your PlayStation, your Xbox, and then, right up to the top, you've got your PC. Sorry, console gamers, if you think I'm being a PC master race, but the reality is that, you have to spend an awful lot more money to get a high-end PC to play games than you do on a console, even the expensive consoles. So it's all been covered, and Stadia are trying to find a market that I'm not sure exists, to be honest.
I feel like maybe they should do something with YouTube. Like,
well, that's what they intend to do, but
they need to they need to maybe they need to do something that's interesting, right? Something unique. So maybe they need to revamp the whole YouTube streaming thing in the same vein that we see with Mixer and Twitch, and really bake in Stadia into that same experience, and somehow if you see a streamer, you want to play the game, play the fucking game right then and there.
Well, that's promised. That's what's supposed to be coming. But
where the fuck is it?
Yeah, it's not there. None of these things that they promised are there. That's the problem. There is no service. It's like you play your games, you stream them, which means they don't play as well as they would in any other service, and all the stuff that they offered that was value added just isn't there. So
it really is too soon, isn't it? They've jumped the gun for some reason. They freaked out about, fuck knows why they freaked out. Like, you're Google. Why are you freaking out? Why have you jumped the gun? You didn't have to do it now. You're Google. You could have waited 3 years, and Project xCloud could have been in the wilderness for 2 years with its beta wheels off. And you still could have come in, swung your big dick around. You've got money. If you'd waited and bought a better package, it could be a different story. Maybe.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
I don't get why they've jumped the gun. It's so strange. And again, it has to be because of next year's consoles. But, why did you pick now to enter the game and then kind of put you in a position where you had to do it a year? You ran out of time. You saw the game was in the last quarter, and you decided to start playing the game in the last quarter when you've kicked no points. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, we're back onto ragging about Stadia, but Joe, can I give you one of my hopes and desires for next year? Because I don't think I gave you one of those. I think we kind of just dribbled about our excitement for stuff, but this is a hope. I would really hope to see some kind of Game Pass integration into Switch. And I know that seems like a real, off-the-cuff long shot. But again, we know Microsoft are being pretty brazen and bold with where they're willing to put Game Pass and Project xCloud. You can play Xbox games on any device, Joe. So is it weird to think that we could somehow get some kind of XPass app or something on a Switch?
No, I don't think it is at all. I actually made a video talking about Nvidia doing this with their streaming service, and there were some kind of loose rumors going around that could happen. Almost 2 years ago now, I think. I honestly, I don't think it's beyond the pale because, and I'll tell you why I think this could happen, even though Microsoft have pretty much said it won't. They've said they won't be putting more games on the Switch, but they haven't said they won't be putting the streaming service on the Switch. The streaming service is slightly different than actually porting games across. And I think it benefits both of them. I really do.
100%.
Because
100%.
Microsoft, people are paying for the service. If they've got their Switch, they might want to play it on the Switch. Why not? Why not make it available for the Switch? They're still paying Microsoft their money. What does it matter to Microsoft? Like you said earlier on, it's all about selling the services. It's not about the hardware anymore. I could see them taking a hit on the hardware, to be honest, with the next gen. I don't think they care anymore. I think they're all about the services. And if they could get it on the Switch, I honestly, I don't see that's a problem for them. I think that they are still making their, as I said, they're still making their monthly service fee or whatever you want to call it. And for Nintendo, that's a way of circumventing the power issues on the Nintendo. If they can get the whole of the Game Pass library through xCloud onto the Switch, all those third-party games that can come onto the Switch that otherwise wouldn't work because of the limited power. It's a no-brainer for both of them. So yeah, I could see it happening. Whether it will or not's open to debate, but yeah, absolutely I could see it happening.
Well, I mean, the only roadblock I foresee would be Nintendo, right? I mean, we've already seen Sony jump in bed with Microsoft to use their servers, like their Azure servers or something like that for next generation streaming and stuff.
Yep.
Or PS Now servers, like that's where they're going to be based now. So, I mean, it's already happening with other people. The only thing that I could see getting in the way is Nintendo maybe being a little bit, disjointed and funky with having an Xbox. I think they'd see the value it could bring, but I think they'd be worried about mixing the two brandings together on one of their devices. That would make me feel weird, if I had a product, right?
But they've already dipped their toe in. That's the thing that makes me more confident that it could happen. You've got Minecraft on there, and that involves signing into Microsoft. So
yeah, I mean that's. I think this is like the next step again, though, isn't it? Or maybe even two more steps, because that's crossplay. Minecraft was already there. All they've done is enable crossplay, but for crossplay to work, it's going through Microsoft servers. It's their game, so why shouldn't it go through their servers?
Yeah.
This is I feel like a whole other ballpark almost, because there's no way Microsoft is going to be like, you know what, Nintendo, you can have Game Pass and Project xCloud and the games library, but, we sure as shit want our branding front, left, right, and center on this app, on Game Pass.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, it's going to be plastered all over it.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's where it gets a little bit weird for me, because, you buy a Nintendo Switch, you boot it up, it's a Nintendo product, and then, chances are, the Nintendo Switch becomes a machine to play Game Pass.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. Which kind of gets a bit weird for me. It gets weird. If I'm Nintendo, it gets a bit weird. I see the advantage of having the service, but it gets a bit strange, and I think it would be definitely you should pause to hesitate to really digest this, because it's the weirdest shit that could possibly happen in in terms of crossovers in video games. That's just wacky. But I would love for it to happen. And I mean, I would really love for it to happen. If, like you said, I think the pros would be huge for both Nintendo and Microsoft. The only thing that gets in the way is kind of that weird cross-branding thing that starts getting in people's heads.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I think, there are some impediments to be got over. I don't see it as being beyond the pale. I also think that Nintendo could see it as a way of heading off some of the phone business, if you see what I mean, because it's going to be on phones anyway. So, do they play it on phones or do they play it on our console? And if they can keep people on their console, then so much the better. So I think for them, there's pros and cons, definitely.
Yeah. Well, maybe it can. Maybe there is a middle ground though. Maybe it is a case of what we've seen with Sony, Sony will use Microsoft servers for stuff, or maybe there is a way to get Game Pass onto the Switch, but kind of dilute a little bit of that in-your-face Xbox branding. Maybe it is enough. Maybe it's like the sign-in with crossplay. Maybe you sign up for Game Pass through the Switch, and then the games are just on the damn Switch. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That for me though, that would be the impediment for Microsoft. I don't think Microsoft would go along with it that way around.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know.
Yeah, but they have got a decent working relationship, so never say never.
Yeah,
I don't think it's 100% likely, but I think there is a chance that we could see it, definitely.
Yeah, I think that would have to be one of my number one wishes for next year, just because I'd like to see how it's going to pan out, and it would be great to be able to play some Xbox games on a portable device.
Oh, can you imagine how excited you and I would get if that happened?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
We'd have to make another show just talking about that. It would be such a great day. It would be brilliant.
How good would it be playing Gears of War 1 remastered on the Nintendo Switch?
That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? I mean, I've played xCloud on my phone with an Xbox controller, and with all the caveats that we've given already, it's a wonderful experience. The ability to just sit down with your phone and start playing a AAA video game. It's phenomenal. It really is great. And it's not there yet, and there are all those caveats I gave about bandwidth and all the rest of it. I'm not going to go back into all that now. But yeah, it is liberating in some respects, and to have it on the go with the Switch. Obviously, the Switch hasn't got a phone connection, but even so, a lot of the time you've got an internet connection you can log into wherever you happen to be, in a hotel or at your family's house or whatever. So yeah, I think it would be great. It would be a fantastic thing, and I'd love to see it. So yeah,
absolutely. Like, if there's a place that Project xCloud could work, like, it's almost like a match made in heaven, because
absolutely
the controls, the interface, it's all there. It's locked down and ready to go. Like, there's not really going to be a better portable device for xCloud than what a Switch could be, right? So
exactly.
That alone is enough to make it kind of an interesting proposition.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I agree. And on that note, we've hit the 2-hour mark.
Yeah, my God, Joe.
So I suppose we better wrap it up there. Yeah. I hope if you've got this far with us, you've enjoyed this one. Before I sign off, Sully, do you want to tell us where we can find you?
You can find me over at GameCast. So you should be able to just search GameCast on YouTube, and we should be... I think we're probably in the top few results for GameCast. We're the pink and white logo people. So click that
I'll
one.
Put a link in anyway. So
yeah, go check us out. So, but other than that, I'll be floating around in Joe's Discord. Make sure you ping at me though in Joe's Discord if you want to catch me, because for some reason his Discord gets a bit funky with pings for me. Or you can find me in the GameCast Discord server. Which, I don't know, maybe Joe, you can put something down in the description box.
Yeah, I'll put a link into that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And other than that, hit me up on Twitter, which I'll be under. I think I'm under One Guy's Opinion on Twitter if you want to follow me there and have a chin wag about something. And yeah.
Cool. And with that, I think it's time for us to wrap up. I'm going to do what I usually do and go and grab myself a cup of tea. And I don't know what Sully's doing. I expect he's going to go and have a kip because it's late. Yeah. And I will speak to you guys in the next one. Bye. Oh, and Merry Christmas.
Oh, and Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year.